Hey guys, welcome to the show. It's been another week, and excuse me. Here it is Wednesday again, so we're going to start up another round of live streams. Hope you guys are in the mood for some stories because I've got quite a few of them. I'm trying to think if we've got any news or anything. Can't really think of anything. Um, As you can see by the red light in the background, I have more chicks in the thing, so if you hear peeps, that's what that's from. Hello to Leia and Osiris, Kathleen, Zachary, hi Blondie, and there's Cindy. Hi Cindy. Welcome everybody. We're glad you could make it. Hopefully the levels are sounding good there. They look to be pretty good. Hey Winter, I'm glad you could make it too. Let's see. We've got our usual 5-story lineup, but tonight we've got another Appalachian Grandpa story as well, so that'll be fun. But yeah, uh, not a whole lot new going on. I guess it's just been business as usual over here. I guess we'll go ahead and get rolling. We might give them a few minutes to show up. I don't know. We'll see who else shows up. Hope you guys are doing all right. Hope you've been having a good week. It's been a long week for me already, but I'm trying to hang in there. So, it's weird being back at work. I don't know how I feel about it. kind of would rather go back to not working, but bills to pay and all. Let's see. I guess we'll go ahead and get rolling. Gonna start us off with a laughing audience story. We're coming down to them now. I feel like we're almost done with our laughing audience cycle here. Then maybe we'll go back to Rayford Woods or something. Maybe I'll I don't know. Maybe I'll do a little vote or something. See what you guys want to listen to. We got a lot of good series out there, and I know I've put a few of them on hold for a little while. But let's go ahead and start with our laughing audience story. It's called The Curtain Goes Up, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Get ready here. Forgot my water. Darn. Oh well. Alrighty, let's get rolling. It was the night of the spring performance, and Gus was nervous about the coming piece. The puppet was sitting at his desk, busily working on something, as he tapped the pen against his face. Maybe... No, perhaps... No, that's not good either. This has to be perfect. I need this to impress the Count, so that we can have a benefactor for the coming season. The Count was coming, and Fausti Hall needed his patronage if it intended to go on. Gus would need to write something amazing if he wanted to catch the eye of the Count. Gus put his little puppet hand on his cheek and appeared to think about what to do next. The room grew a little darker as he contemplated, and suddenly 3 shadowy figures came dancing out of nowhere and offered to help him. Someone sobbed in the audience, a child scared of the shadows, but everyone else was dead silent as the muses came on stage. Gus, they all said... Oh. They all said in one unified voice, "We have come to help you in your time of need." Gus looked up from his paper, and his little felt face looked confused. There was silence for a moment, and you could hear the audience sitting in anticipation as they waited for Gus to answer. Carlos tried to remember if there had been a change to the script. The ghost of the hall was supposed to come and give him his inspiration, and when the stage direction seemed to be coming... When no stage direction... Missed a word there. And when no stage direction seemed to be coming, he decided to improvise. I don't understand. Where is the ghost who haunts the music hall? She always helps me when I am in need. We're here to help you now, and we have exactly what you've been looking for." The muses flooded around Gus as he sat at his work, and as they did, his hands began to move as he wrote things on the little piece of fake paper in front of him. Carlos could feel the puppet moving outside of his control, and when he took his hand away, it did not immediately fall down into its normal position. The hand continued to work, and when it looked up, Carlos heard the puppet speak with the voice that he had given it so long ago. "Yes, yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Thank you, muses. This will make the concert one to remember." "There is no need to thank us. We serve the audience, and the audience will be appeased." The audience, probably not the one the muses were talking about, began to clap as the curtain came down on the first scene. Carlos headed away from the stage to the door that led to the door that led onto the studio set. He wasn't surprised to find that it was locked. They were trapped here now, he and Jean, as Jean turned to look at him in horror. He knew he wasn't the only one who had recognized the predicament they were in. "What are we going to do?" Jean asked him. Carlos said nothing. It was too late to do anything. As they watched, the puppets began to jump off their hooks and off of their places where they had been stored. They began to move of their own accord, and as they made ready to enter a new scene, Carlos felt a fear rise in him that no puppet had ever given him. "Hey, Brandy, I'm glad you could make it." "Excuse me, sir, I'm going to need to see some ID." Warwick stopped on his way to the checkpoint. He'd put on the uniform, but he realized he had failed to get an ID made to really complete the costume. The pants were too big, but he'd rolled the cuffs up, and the belt that he had on made it halfway passable. He hadn't had any boots. He'd had to wear his black work shoes that he had always worn with the department. The shirt had been too big, but he had tucked it in and rolled up the sleeves the way he had seen some of the other guys wearing them, and he thought he looked okay. He had hoped he'd be able to sneak past the checkpoint without garnering any attention, but as he turned to look at the other security guards who were standing around the entryway, he put on his best smile and prepared to bluff his way in. "Sorry, I'm pretty new, and they told me to head down here. My name's Mike. It's my first day. They said you guys needed more hands for a special event going on tonight." The guard, who had called him... Let's try that again. The guard who had called out to him, an older man with thick glasses and more gray in his hair than black, squinted at Warwick and seemed to be looking for a lie. "Who exactly sent you? I wasn't aware that we were getting any new security staff tonight." Warwick snapped his fingers as if trying to remember something. Deborah, I'm terrible with names. It was the girl in the office. I was supposed to be on a different soundstage tonight, but she told me to head over here because you needed extra hands. Like I said, it's my first night. I'm so new they didn't even have time to issue me a badge yet." The old guy squinted at him again, and Warwick can tell he was really looking for a reason to tell him to get lost. "You got a driver's license? Something with your name on it? It's a pretty big event tonight, and we can't have people just sneaking in." Warwick took out the wallet that he kept in reserve and showed the man his ID. The name Mike Jennings was on it, and it was something that he used when he was trying to avoid giving people his real name. A lot of people that ran in circles like his usually preferred to use aliases, and most of them wouldn't believe you if you gave them their real name anyway. Try that again. and most of them wouldn't believe you if you gave them your real name. Warwick had a couple of these that he'd had made up over the years, but Mike Jennings was one of his favorites. The security guy took the wallet and looked at the ID, taking it out of the film paper and turning it in the light. Warwick stood as still as he could, trying to seem nonchalant. If these guys thought he was running some kind of con, then they could smell him out pretty quickly. They would smell him out pretty quickly. If he acted as if he were supposed to be there, then they would think he was just new and unsure of where he was supposed to go. 90% of undercover work was just acting like you were supposed to be there, and it was something that Warwick had learned pretty early in his career. Excuse me. Okay, sorry for the third degree. We've had a lot of weird shit happening around here lately, and the last thing I need is somebody faking their way into the premiere. Head over to the back door and make sure that it's secured. Stay there until the show is over and make sure it's locked after the stage crew leaves. Think you can do that, rookie? Of course, Warwick assured him as he threw a crisp salute. Do you have any keys for the back door? They didn't know where I was going exactly, so I didn't get any gear. The officer, clearly the guy in charge of the security for the event, rolled his eyes as he put down a radio, a ring of keys, and a flashlight. We don't do armed security on this lot, so if you're packing heat, you need to leave it in your car. Don't hit anybody with that flashlight, don't sit on that radio and crowd the channel, and don't lose those keys for God's sakes. Those keys are expensive to replace, and if they aren't returned to me by the end of the shift, I'm going to bill your supervisor for them, and let him know why. No worries, sir. I'll bring everything back at the end of shift. You have my word. The man gave Warwick another hard look before nodding and pushing the stuff across the desk at him. Well, get moving then. Warwick nodded and headed towards the back door. It would be a perfect entry point, and he still had a little time to get into position before all hell was going to break loose. Excuse me. The music is great. The Count is sure to be impressed, Judy said, bouncing from foot to foot as she looked it over. She passed it to Clark, and as he looked it over, he began to bounce from foot to foot as well. The beat is outstanding. Bum bum ba 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 bum bum ba bum bum. The crowd is going to go wild. The two of them were absent-mindedly thumping in time with their bumps and bops. Gus was still standing still as he let them get it out of their system, and as they stopped, it seemed it was his turn to act. I'm glad you like it. Take it to the band and have them practice. I need to go see the costumes and see what we can cobble together before the show. I want everybody ready when the Count arrives. The twins bumped and thumped up the hall as Gus left off stage and the crowd clapped. Everyone was excited for the upcoming show, and it seemed that the time was finally... Try it again. And it seemed that the time had finally come for the talents of the troupe to be recognized. The puppets moved so smoothly that the audience could hardly believe they were being maneuvered by hand. They might have been surprised to learn that they weren't. Carlos and Jean leaned against the door, watching the puppets move and dance to someone else's call. Carlos took a step towards the opening, the area the puppets inhabited when they walked and played, but sat down again a moment later. He could stand up, he could climb the stage and make a scene, but what good would it do? It was all outside their control, and maybe that was fine. Maybe all of this deserved to be out and over, and sooner rather than later. The sooner the show hit its climax, the better. If it was the end of them too, then so be it. Carlos was ready for a rest. Warwick snuck backstage slowly, not wanting to raise attention. It hadn't been hard to get through the door in the back. The guard had abandoned his post, after all. Warwick could hear the story unfolding, the music swelling and rolling as it ebbed and flowed, but it was what he could see that alarmed him. Shadows. Shadows moved everywhere. They roamed between doors, in cracks between offices, in the spaces too dark to make out. And as he got closer to the soundstage, he saw them following him. They were gathering, preparing to stop him, and as he began to run, they pooled and flowed like a wave. The light behind him flickered. A wave of shadows rose. Warwick felt the doors go streaking past as he ran flat out, and as the door came closer and closer, he threw himself at it as the edge of the wave threatened to grab him. He fell through in a mass of arms and momentum, and every head turned to look at him. Gus wants the perfect instrument for the spring concert. He went into the depths of the theater in search of... Carlos could hear the end. Well, thank you. I thought it was a little gravelly tonight. I haven't been feeling well today. Carlos didn't hear the end as someone banged through a door and the music faltered as everyone's attention was stolen. Excuse me, this is a closed set. We would ask that the audience please respect the actors on stage as they... He heard it when someone came into the hall, the voice of authority as it cut through the narration Julie was giving to the crowd. He stopped halfway, yelling for someone to stop that man. She stopped halfway through, yelling for someone to stop that man, but he was already making his way through the She stopped halfway through, yelling for someone to stop that man, but he was already making his way through the seated guests and towards the stage. My name is Agent Warwick with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This performance is canceled by the order of the FBI. Comply or be subject to extreme measures. We'll have to see what happens later next week. But that's our laughing audience story for the night. I know. Too many cliffhangers in these series. I suppose we'll move on to our Kashmir story next. I know you guys like to go back to Kashmir. Give me just a second. I will be right back. Shouldn't take me more than a minute. Alrighty, I'm back. I had to go get my water. Levels still sound pretty good. Scoot a little closer there. Alrighty. Okay, so alright, let's do our Kashmir story next. This is a story about somebody we haven't visited yet. A fellow out for a hunt, and I think he's about to find a little bit more than he bargained for out in the woods of Kashmir. So this one's called Strangers in the Woods, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Daniel hadn't been hunting in years. It was one of the few things he and his father had done together, and he missed it after his dad had died when he was a teenager. The woods had been dangerous after he had passed, but now that the woods were a little safer, Daniel felt like he might be able to head back in for a long-missed hunting trip. He threw his bag into the back of his pickup truck, hung his gun on the rack behind the seat. It hadn't ridden there in quite some time, not since that deer had gotten stuck in his brother-in-law's backyard fence, and as he went to slide into the truck, a voice came from the front of the house that stopped him in his tracks. Forgetting something? He looked at the bag as his... Try that one again. He looked. Lori, Michelle, good to see you. We've got a packed house tonight. He looked at the bag in his trunk and seemed to calculate. Let's see. Ammo, lunch, dinner, deer urine, salt bait, rifle, extra clothes. No, I think I've got it all. She put her hands on her hips and gave him an unamused look. I'd better get a kiss before you head to the woods, or there may not be any real dinner when you get back. Daniel laughed and stepped towards her, wrapping her in a hug as he planted a kiss on her lips. He and Sharon had been married for a long, long time, and he would never dream of leaving without giving her a kiss. He loved her as much today as he had on the day they met, and he always would. Like I'd ever leave without a kiss. Feel like some fresh venison later? She snorted and kissed him again. I'd be impressed with whatever you bring back. Are you sure it's safe? The woods can be pretty dangerous. Don't worry. I've got something that'll keep me safe. Well, you keep that gun close at hand, then. I don't want to lose you in the woods. You're the most handsome man in town, and I'd hate to have to go looking again. He kissed her again for good measure, and then hopped into his truck and drove towards the access road that would take him to the woods just outside the prison. As he drove... he took out the talisman that his father had showed him so many years ago and laid it on his chest. His father had gotten it from his father's father, and they had passed it along like that for 5 or 6 generations. His father had given it to him when he was 13, and Daniel wondered if it was the reason that he hadn't come back from the woods. It was strange, a working of beads and intricate horsehair, and it always made his eyes hurt a little when he looked at it. The patterns were asymmetrical, some kind of unflattering geometry, and Daniel didn't like to look at it for very long. His father had told him that his grandfather had explained the talisman would keep the creatures of the forest away. He said that many of them were dangerous, but if you had the talisman, then they wouldn't hurt you. Daniel had looked at it like it was magic, and it may very well have been. His 6 times great-grandfather had gotten it from an Apache chief, or so the family legend went, and it was supposed to protect you from all sorts of things. He kept it on his chest as he turned down the access road, glad to have it, but hoping that he wouldn't need it. He had thought about going to his grandfather's old hunting shack, the one that lay a few miles from the prison, but he assumed it would be in disrepair and probably wouldn't be as much use for camping out. He didn't really intend to camp out in the first place. He was going early enough that he could shoot something, maybe a couple of somethings, and then he could go home to his wife, who would help him clean it. It would be a good day. He just knew it would be. And as he found the road he wanted and took it to the little turnabout at the end, he parked his truck, grabbed his gun and his bag before locking it up and heading off into the woods. Daniel loved the woods. He knew a lot of people thought they were scary, but Daniel had always loved them, despite them being a little scary. Lots of things were scary. Dogs could be scary. Dangerous animals could be scary. The weather could be scary, but scary things could also be beautiful. Scary things could be exhilarating to look at, and it gave Daniel a little thrill of excitement to head off into the woods and test his luck against whatever lived there. He found an old deer blind out in the woods, something made out of branches and pine boughs, and as he crouched behind it... Excuse me. And as he crouched behind it, he got everything ready. He put out his bait, he sighted his rifle, he hunkered down as the smell of pine boughs covered his scent. The deer urine would make him smell like a doe. Goodness. The deer urine would make him smell like a doe, and he was hoping for a nice fat buck to bring home with him. The deer blind was something that he and his father had constructed when he was young, and he was surprised that it had survived all these years. It was made very well, the branches interlinked so that they could survive even a strong wind, but it was definitely showing some age. The pine boughs needed to be replaced badly, and some of the branches had come down, but that didn't really matter. He would still be hidden from sight behind it, and that was what counted. He took out a soda and cracked it quietly as he made himself comfortable and waited for something to come along. He heard the crunch of sticks and leaves before he saw anything, and when he pulled his rifle out, he searched around for whatever was making the noise. He saw a pair of antlers, though they didn't look quite right. They were bone white, and they seemed to be meandering along through the brush in an almost human way. It wasn't like a deer, looking for tasty things to eat. It was more like a person who was wearing antlers and just sort of walking along. Daniel told himself that was stupid. Nobody would be out here wearing deer antlers during hunting season. That sounded like a great way to get yourself shot. He sighted up his rifle and found the top of the head, and pulled the trigger as whatever it was came out of the woods. He had a second to see the bearded old man with the deer antler hat before his head snapped back and he hit the ground in a heap. Daniel was running, his gun left behind, as he ran towards the man to see if maybe he'd just winged him. Daniel knew he hadn't winged him. He'd hit him direct... Can't talk today. He'd hit him dead center of the skull, but maybe, just maybe, he'd get lucky, and the guy wouldn't be hurt too badly. He could yell at him for wearing deer antlers out in the woods during deer hunting season, and maybe the old hermit would feel stupid enough to go away without asking too many questions. He breathed a sigh of relief when he got to the old man and saw that he was slowly sitting up and rubbing at his head. He had just winged him. That was good. Are you okay? God damn it, but what were you doing out here with deer antlers on? Don't you know it's hunting season? You could have gotten killed. The man looked around, clearly not understanding what was going on right away, and that's when Daniel realized he had been hit a little worse than he thought he had. The guy's antlers were cocked back, and he could see the red hole in his forehead. It had gone all the way through. A bright, almost painful light was shining into Daniel's face, and as he watched the hole close up, the man seemed to not even notice that he'd been a hair's breadth from death. Me? Oh, I'm fine. I just took a little tumble. Are you doing some hunting? What is it you're hunting for, friend? Is it deer? Or is it the truth? Daniel had begun to back away, not sure what to make of the strange man and his healing head wound. As he did, he saw other people wearing deer antlers as they proceeded out of the woods towards him. They had cut the skull caps off the deer and taken the antlers with them. And as they moved out of the woods and into the clearing, Daniel could see that there were dozens of them. Stay back. Don't make me use this. But that's when he realized that he no longer had his rifle. He left it behind. Now he really wished he had it. He didn't know if it'd be any good, but it certainly couldn't hurt. Come on, friend. Why not sit for a minute and listen to the truth? We can help you find it. We can help you find lots of things. Daniel turned and began to run. If he could just make it to his truck, then he could get out of here. He just had to make it to the truck, and then he'd drive out of here and get away from these people. They were coming after him in a pack, all of them running flat out as they tried to get him. And when he got to the blind that he'd been using to hunt, he thought for a moment about stopping to pick up his gun. He could get it later. He could come back and get it another time. He didn't think these people had any interest in his firearm, and he believed their interest was in him alone. When hands suddenly grabbed him from behind, Daniel realized that he'd dithered a little too long. No need to run, brother. Let's have a chat. Let's see if we can't change your perspective on some things. He reached for the gun, but they were already dragging him back into the woods. As he disappeared into that womb of green, he wondered if he would ever come out again. And if he did come out, he wondered if he'd still be the same. Then one of them pushed him against the tree, his hands firm and implacable against his chest. And when he opened a book that he had pulled out of his pocket, Daniel was filled with a light that only made him blink a little bit. Then Daniel couldn't remember why he had been so interested in running. Daniel couldn't remember why he'd been interested in anything. Sharon was getting worried. Daniel had never been out this late for much of anything, and the fact that he had gone into the woods made her nervous. He should have been home hours ago. The sun had been down for a while now. She was just about to call the sheriff back when she heard his truck door close and heard his reassuring steps as he walked up the driveway. She was out of the door and in his arms in a moment, hugging him and telling him how scared she had been. What happened? What took you so long? He didn't hug her back. He didn't hug her the way he usually did at all. And when she looked up at him, something had changed. He looked different, stranger, and his eyes looked like a doll's eyes as they canted down to hers. I've got something I want to talk to you about. Something I found in the woods. She took a step back towards the house, but when he grabbed her by the arm, he dragged her with a strength that she had never known he had. Don't worry. I wanted to run too, at first, but now I know better. Come with me and see the things that I've found, and I'll show you what the bright can offer you too. That's your Kashmir story for this week. Ugh. Let's see. Thinking maybe we should save the grandpa story for last. Oh, hell. I'll go ahead and read the grandpa story. We'll go ahead and get the grandpa story done, and then we'll move on to our short stories, I reckon. I've got lines for Glimmer on here, but you'll just have to imagine them until the story comes out, because I haven't put Ladama's lines in yet. Hey, actually, I bet I could do that. Hang on. Where'd they go? See if we can't. Yeah, there we go. What the hell? Usually it lets me download them. That's weird. No, I just want to download stuff. There we go. That's what I was after. Stand by for just a second, guys. Oh, yeah. Every season is bright season, apparently. Oh, that's okay, Leia. We'll catch you next time, alright? We'll be here. And you can always watch us in reruns, I mean. Alright, so this one is called The House in the Holler. And I do hope you guys enjoy it. I'm going to turn on the sound a little, so hopefully we can get some Ladama lines here. Hang on a second. Ah, it's too echoey. I tell you what, I'll read it out, and you guys will just have to wait till later to hear the Ladama lines, I guess. But we'll get them in there. So, this is your grandpa story, The House in the Holler, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And when the hunting party came to aid, if I could read, and when the hunting party came to the aid of what we believed was a separate party of hunters, we discovered that the creatures had packed a party of Boy Scouts against the cave wall near the gully. Their scoutmaster had been injured and was barely conscious, and the boys were trying their best to defend him as they called for help. My party put the creatures aside, pushing them into the woods where they couldn't hurt anyone. The boys thanked us, but we... We disappeared into the forest before they could get a good look at us. I'm sure that they all have stories to tell one of these... if I could read. Can't read today. Damn. But we disappeared into the forest before they could get a good look at us. I'm sure that they all have a story to tell when someone talks about creatures that they've encountered in the woods. I just hope they don't remember us. I'd hate for people to come looking for a mysterious forest party. We laughed. Grandpa's laugh cut short by a sudden cough. We were all sitting on the back porch, as we often did, sharing stories and talking about better times. There were quite a few empty beer bottles sitting around. John had joined us earlier that evening, and Glimmer had come after sundown. She was sitting beside me, our hands interlinked, and John had taken the chair next to Grandpa at the small, spindly-legged table. I I can't. Of course I can't read. Everybody knows that. I was about 3 beers deep, John and I going bottle for bottle, and I was pretty sure Glimmer was nursing the same one that she'd had most of the night. She didn't really have a taste for alcohol, at least not the poor stuff that we bought at the store, but the real surprise was that Grandpa had stuck to water tonight. I had never known Grandpa to turn down a bottle of beer in the evening, and it made me a little worried. I'm sure those boys were thankful, Grandpa said as he took another swig from his water bottle to clear his throat. I should hope so. Those creatures would have ripped them to pieces otherwise. So many of them had hatchets and little knives out to defend themselves, but these were the big dog things that live in the woods around the prison. Their numbers are not so great these days, but they can still be formidable. I don't think I've heard of anyone going missing in the woods lately, John put in as he popped his bottle down a little harder than he meant to. A lot of people have been taking to the woods to go camping after that business at the prison last year. Many of them are saying that the woods might finally be safe again. Though, he looked towards the woods, his eyes going a little distant. I'm not sure that was the case for a friend of mine. I don't know what he encountered in the woods, some strange man or something, but he hasn't been the same since. I'm a little worried about him. I might bring him out here one of these evenings and see if you guys could have a look at him. If he'll come, that is. Earl's been acting funny lately, and I don't really like it. Oh. What does that gal of yours think about Earl? That's not the grandpa voice. Hang on. What does that gal of yours think about Earl? Grandpa asked, clearly trying to change the subject a little. John smiled. She likes him well enough. Before the thing in the woods, we'd gone on a few dates with him and Candace. She's been spending some time with Candace lately. I think she's a little worried about Earl, too. We sat in silence for a few seconds, listening to the crickets, and when Grandpa broke the silence this time, I could already feel a story coming on. Grandpa's stories were like weather patterns. Sometimes you could just feel the air change, and you knew that it was going to rain or the wind was going to pick up. Grandpa's stories were a lot like that. His face would shift or his tone would change slightly, and you just knew that there was about to be a story in the works. Glimmer, did you say those Boy Scouts were near the gully? Glimmer took a little sip of her beer and nodded as she grimaced. I did. They had been pretty far from their campsite, and it was a wonder they weren't worse than they were. I wonder if the ruins of that old house are still out there. I rescued some kids out that way when your grandma was still alive. It was after I'd retired from the trucking company, and between that and my military pension, I was doing pretty well. We'd had some kids go missing, you see, and the only thing that connected them was that they'd been playing in the woods before they'd vanished. He looked up to find all of us looking at him, and when he laughed, it brought on another. Ugh. And when he laughed, it brought on another round of coughing. I guess I set myself up for that one, didn't I? I guess I'll go ahead and tell you about the house. They used to sit there by the gully, down in a holler as we called it, and how I rescued those 8 kids all by myself. It was a summer to remember. It was the year I retired from the trucking company, and I was enjoying my retirement quite a bit. I'd put enough work back to... That's not the one. I'd put enough back to keep me until my military retirement ran out, something I assumed would happen in the next 10 years, and I'd gotten a little more proactive in the community. I'd always been someone that people knew they could come to for matters spiritual and spooky, but now I had the time and the availability to really knuckle down and get something done. In the spring, I had displaced 2 boo hags that had been pretty active in the area and cleansed 2 houses of poltergeists. I'd even chased away something that was menacing the local Lutheran church, though I suspect that might have had more to do with the state of their garbage cans than anything truly paranormal. Something else had been brewing for the last couple of weeks. It was a case of missing kids. 8 missing kids, to be precise. They had disappeared just as school had gotten out for the year, and their parents really wanted to find them. Even if they were deceased, the parents had gone on television talking about how they wanted their babies returned, and they were willing to pay for it. There had been people pretending to be the kidnappers, even people attempting to run a ransom, but none of them had been serious. The kids remained missing, and nobody seemed to be able to find them. Sheriff Masterson was still fairly new to the position when he came to me, and I understood what he wanted as he sat on my front porch making small talk. Masterson had seen some things, and he'd asked me to come and help him more than once when things proceeded a little out of his comfort zone. He told me that he wanted me to help with the case, and I told him I'd prefer to leave police work to the professionals. He looked at your grandma, and she understood that he wanted to speak to me privately, so she headed inside and began working on something for dinner. Rusty, I don't think anybody took those 8 kids. I don't think they were taken. I think they were snatched. I also think that whatever snatched them is not entirely human. What makes you think that? I asked as I swirled the tea around in my glass and really made him work for it. All these kids who had gone missing had one thing in common. They were last seen near the old gully, the one on the outskirts of town. We spent. That's a T. We spent most of our time telling kids to stay out of the woods because it wasn't safe, but you know, kids, they're gonna go and do what they want to do. 3 bikes had been reported on the side of the road near the gully, and all 3 of them had been identified as belonging to the missing kids. We also found a bag near the road that belonged to one of the girls who had gone missing, and her boyfriend is another of those missing children. 3 of the other kids told their parents they were going to go exploring and were known to frequent the area around the gully. We know that the gully was the last place any of them were supposed to be heading, and we believed they'd gone to the old Kitterman house. That put my neck hair up when he told me as much. The old Kitterman house was very similar to the widow's house that I told you about all those years ago. It was a place that occupied a space in the here and the hereafter. The house had an aura about it, a feeling of unease, and people did not often go to the Kitterman house and come out again. Anyone who went close to it suddenly found a reason to be somewhere else, and it was ageless and seemingly unchanging. If the kids had gone to the Kitterman house, then they might already be gone, because whatever lived there was not an entity to be taken lightly. "Are you sure?" I asked him. "We weren't, not until today." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet, the kind of thing that only a kid could love. It had a sheriff's badge on the outside, and that kind of leather work that makes you think of cowboys and range riders. Inside was a picture of Davy Maddox, the last kid who had gone missing in the case. We found that in the front yard outside the Kitterman house. I think it's pretty clear that he didn't just drop it there for fun. I know you understand some of the spooky things that go on around here. I'd like to leave the police work to policemen as well, but when I find something like this that I don't understand, I like to go seek out an expert. You are as close to an expert as this town has, and I'm asking you to help me." I had to close my eyes and prayed that this burden would be taken from me. The last thing I wanted to do was work for 50 years so that I could go and get myself killed in the old Kitterman place. I didn't want to go into that house, not for blood or money, but if there were kids involved, then I knew that I needed to do what was right. I didn't believe that whatever was there would kill me, but I knew that it would change me, and that it was more than enough to make me think twice. "Okay," I told him sullenly, "I'll go, but I'm the only one going in there." Masterson bristled at that. "Like hell you are. If you go in alone, then I'm going to have to go in after 8 kids and some spooky nut. More likely, if I can't handle it, then neither can you. Trust me on this. It'll work better if I don't have to worry about getting you killed, too. You can come with me to the house. You can drive me there if you want, but when it's time, I go in alone." Masterson didn't like it, but he agreed, and I told your grandmother that I'd be late as I grabbed my bag, my staff, and hopped in the truck so that we could head out to the old Kitterman place. The Kitterman place was a pretty grisly bit of local legend. Glimmer might have heard of it, but I doubt you or John ever have. Roger Kitterman was a woodsman who lived out by the gully for as long as anyone could remember. He was secretive, but there was claims that he had a woman out there. There were further claims that she was there against her will and not altogether happy to be there. Kitterman was something of a hermit. He kept to himself and only came into town when he absolutely had to. The only person that stood up for him was the owner of the general store, one of the few people in town he did regular business with. The general store owner had bought his lumber and firewood that he sometimes brought to sell, and it sold him supplies for most of the time he'd been operating the store. He said Kitterman was a little odd, but he did not believe he was up to no good. He said that if Kitterman had a woman up there, then it was not likely to be against the woman's will. Other men in town didn't put a lot of stock in such, and they decided to go up there and have a look. They found Kitterman and asked him about the woman. Kitterman told them it was none of their concern and that they needed to mind their business. They didn't much care for that kind of talk, and legend says they beat him to death right there on the front porch of his property. When the girl came out to tell her side of the story, they ignored her until the deed was already done. The girl turned out to be his niece, someone he was instructing in the art of woodcraft and scrimshaw. Kitterman had a Sorry, guys. Struggling a little tonight. Kitterman had a basement where he'd been making scrimshaw and wood carvings for quite some time, and when the girl had shown an aptitude for it, her parents had sent her to study with her uncle, maybe hoping that she could make something of herself and have something to fall back onto if things didn't work out. The townspeople were ashamed of what they had done, and they sent the girl back to her family with full apologies. Whether or not the girl's family was satisfied with the apologies, or the town paying for the burial, Mr. Kitterman was not. The house stayed empty from that day on, but people who came to the area often said that the lights would flicker inside, and you could sometimes see a shadowy figure moving around the property. They said that smoke would come up the chimney, and that children often claimed to see someone in the woods who would call to them and try to entice them to follow. It seemed that whatever Mr. Kitterman was in life, his shade wanted to punish the townspeople for their actions. He lured off some of their children, but never more than a few, which the townspeople always assumed were runaways. Today, he had taken 8 children, and something had to be done about it. Sheriff Masterson did not want to stay in the car, but I told him it was for the best, and I proceeded in by myself. The house was just as creepy in the daylight as it was at night time, and when I booted the door down, I found a 1-bedroom cottage with nothing much to speak of. There were a couple of chairs, a kitchen area, a moldy old bed that sat in one corner, and a pallet by the fire where the girl had likely slept. The house had been empty for nearly 100 years, but everything in it still looked fresh and well kept. I knew a glamour when I saw one, and I could feel the old spirit moving around as it watched me. What I didn't see was a way into the basement, something I assumed would lead me to the kids. I looked around, looking for a ladder or maybe a secret panel, but I wasn't finding anything until I heard the cry. I followed it to an old rug in the middle of the wood floor, and as I kicked it aside, I found the trap door I'd been looking for. Kitterman had been no slouch. The piece fit expertly together, and if I hadn't known what I was looking at, I probably would have walked right past it. I yanked on the knothole and descended into the basement that was more root cellar than anything. They were all down there. They were all half-starved and in need of water, but something had been keeping them alive, though I couldn't speculate on the purpose. The room was covered in woodwork, wood toys, forest scenes, tools, and accoutrements. The ghost had been hard at work, if that was all his doing. I wanted to go to the children, but I already knew they were a ploy to get me to let my guard down. Instead, I called out to the ghosts that resided there to come and show themselves and be done with this. The shade of Roger Kitterman was much more in death than he had been in life. He'd been a stocky man, big barrel chest and large arms for carrying wood, and his shade resembled something like an ogre from a Japanese fairy tale. He grinned at me with a mouthful of razor teeth and told me he'd been expecting me. He had brought the children here as bait because he wanted to catch the wizard that had been skulking around and stirring up the spirits. He said that once he ate me, my power would be his. Then he'd finally be able to stalk the woods and hunt at his leisure. I wasn't about to have any of that, though. He lunged at me, but I pulled out some runes that glowed when he got close, and he backed away as if I'd threatened him with a branding iron. I started speaking the prayers that I knew, the spells of sealing, and whatever he had been expecting, it clearly wasn't that. He'd gone from being a frightful creature to cowering in no time. I bound him to the earth. I sealed him in the dirt of the house, and I laid a spell on him so that he would never come out of that house or even the basement ever again. He cursed at me, telling me that he would break free and I would live to regret it. But I didn't listen. I went about and freed the kids, letting them head outside before I finished it for good. Once everyone was outside, I spoke a few words and set the house ablaze. The ghost wailed and screamed, telling me that it was only joking, and if I set it free, it would never bother me again. It begged me for mercy. It begged me for redemption, but I was never in the redemption business. I climbed out of the root cellar as the floor was getting ready to give way. Then as I ran, I heard the whole house coming down around me. The upstairs was now little more than a dust pile of broken furniture, and I'd barely gotten out to the front yard when the whole thing came down in a great loud racket. I told Sheriff Masterson that I'd knocked a lantern over down there when I saved the kids, and he nodded as we got all the kids into the cruiser and drove them back to town. None of them really remembered what had happened. They had all been too dehydrated and malnourished to be reliable witnesses, but they tell me that the side of the old Kinnaman house is still alight. One day, I might go and clean it up a little, maybe to spell some of the energy. But a part of me likes to leave it as a warning to anyone who thinks they might come into my town and stir up that much trouble. Let the grave of Roger Kitterman prove to them that I do not suffer that kind of foolishness. We were all quiet as the story came to an end, the weight of it settling over us. Glimmer and John decided they should go after that, the night getting on, and both of them wanting to go to bed or get about their duties. I walked John to his car, and then I walked Glimmer to our usual place in the wood. Grandpa had just sat there through it all, staring into the woods and seeming to be lost in thought as he weighed as the weight of what was the thought? as the weight of it all fell on him. As the weight of it all fell onto him as well. I came back after taking Glimmer home and shook my head as I told him that had been quite a grisly tale and that I wasn't sure I'd sleep a wink that night. Grandpa didn't say anything, still just looking out at the woods, and seemed to contemplate. I put a hand on his shoulder and asked him if he was ready to go inside, and when he toppled forward, I knew that I wasn't about to get any sleep that night anyway. I took him to the hospital straight away, his breathing shallow and ragged, and his heart rate looked like a bird as it beat against his cage. Try that one again. And his heart. Let's see. And his heart rate looked like a bird as it beats against the side of a cage. They gave him medicine, hooked him to machines, but when I asked if it was the cough or something else, the doctor finally told me the truth. I'm honestly surprised your grandfather has lasted as long off oxygen as he has already. Your grandfather has stage 3 lung cancer. It's quite remarkable that he's still alive at all. He must have seen something on my face because his next words hit me like a brick. My God, he didn't tell you? He's known for months. He left me then. He left me to contemplate what I was going to do with this information and what I would say to Grandpa when he finally came around. Maybe Grandpa's story hadn't been as heavy as I thought it was, because the news I just received felt like a punch in the guts. Alrighty, that's our Grandpa story there. Let me readjust here for a second. Whew, the wheels fell off my chair, so I've just been so I just took the rest of the wheels off. Kind of making the best of it. And yeah, that is, Grandpa stories are getting a little heavy these days. I mean, goodness. I say that like I don't know that the rest of them are going to get even heavier, but, you know, we'll get there. We'll get there. Let's see. Alrighty. Let's move into our short stories we've got this week. Yeah, I know. It's a rough time for Grandpa here. But I'm sure he'll pull through. I'm sure he'll pull it together, you know. Maybe. We'll see. Oh, that's right, Blondie. Don't spoil nothing now. Blondie's been doing some editing for me, so do not ask her about outcomes. She cannot tell you. She's been sworn to secrecy. Anyway, though, we're going to move on to a story about a train. It's called the Nowhere Train, and it's a little bit weirder, but I do hope you guys enjoy it. It wasn't really a choice. It was survival. I'd been living rough since I was 15. Dad had too many kids, and Mom had already run off with her new boyfriend. I was the middle kid, the one that no one would miss, and the first one that Dad stopped feeding. After a week of eating scraps and sleeping on the porch, Dad sold my bed, I decided to take my chances on the street. Now, here I was, 26 years later, living rough and shivering out in the cold. It was 16 degrees that night, and I was shivering in a little coal shack by the railroad tracks. The railroad station was mostly deserted. The Trains came through about as often as the security guy drove around in his golf cart, and I had a roof and walls, but the wind was whistling through the cracks. All I had was a thin blanket to keep me warm. I was looking at the tough little remnants of coal as they lay on the floor and wishing I had something to burn them in, when I heard the last thing I had expected: a train pulling into the old depot. Oh, yeah, Winter. We're in like the last season of Grandpa, so we're definitely winding down our Grandpa stories. But there's still a few more though, don't worry. It wasn't often that you saw trains coming in these days. Trains still came in, but usually there was a truck waiting for them so they could unload and head out. That was one of the few times the foreman and the security guy came out at the same time, and the lack of trucks made me think this one might be a mistake. I peeked through the slit in the shack and saw, to my surprise, that one of the doors had slid open, and the air coming out was making the cold air steam. I was running before I had time to think about it. This could be some sort of trap. Could be a dream or hallucination, but right then, I didn't care. The last time I had been truly warm was when I was 14 and sleeping by the fire as my mother stroked my hair. I desperately wanted to be warm again. I jumped through the door and fell onto the cold floor of the train in a heap. When the door slammed shut behind me, I was up like a shot and banging at it with desperation. This was too good to be true. I had known that. It was a trap, a game, some kind of con to stick a person inside this car for God knew what reason. And as the train picked up speed again, I was thrown to the ground as it trundled along. I was rubbing my jaw when the lights came on, showing me a door on the other end of the compartment. It was more like the doors that... What? More like the door was ringed in lights, making a halo that I would have been blind to miss. I still felt like it was a trap, a clear and obvious trap at that, but I didn't seem to have a lot of other choices. I walked slowly towards it, not sure what I'd do when I got there. I opened it to find not armed men or a weird murder car, but a dining car full of people in fancy dress. They all turned to look at me as I entered, their faces dark and unreadable. I thought for a moment that I'd wandered into some different kind of murder car. This would be one of those weird rich people parties you saw in horror movies, the kind where they killed their special guest for Satan or Parliament or some other such thing. As suddenly as they had turned, they all smiled in unison as they raised the glass and called out, "Welcome!" Confetti fell from the ceiling, and they all began to sing something I was unfamiliar with, a song that I'd learned line by line before all this was over. Another soul on the nowhere train, another lost soul who must... Shit. Had not anticipated getting sick and having to sing. Another soul... Alright. Another soul on the nowhere train, another lost soul who's much the same. Nowhere to be, nothing to see. Come stay with us and forget your pain. They cheered when it was over, and when a woman in a sequin dress pulled me towards the revelers, she pushed a drink into my hand and put a kiss on my mouth. I must have tasted like old teeth and older beans, but she didn't care. She smiled and laughed and pushed the glass closer to my mouth. "Drink, drink. This party's for you, after all. What else was I to do? I drank. The booze was like nothing I'd ever tasted. One sip gave me bourbon, another gave me champagne, another gave me whiskey, the good stuff instead of the stuff I was used to. After a few drinks, I was tipsy enough to be pushed towards the coat closet by the woman in the sparkly dress, and after a few very close minutes, I emerged dressed in a suit that cost more than the car my father had always raved about. I fit right in with the others, but it was more than that. My hair was combed, my teeth had been brushed, my skin felt clean in a way that it hadn't in years. "What have you done to me?" I asked, but my tone was pleased. "Just made you into the man you deserve to be. Everyone here is who they deserve to be." Ugh. It's the nowhere train, and everyone here deserves to be who they are. It was an odd statement, but I was drunk and not in the best state of mind for figuring things out. So, what's the nowhere train? It's a place for the lost, a place for those with nowhere to go. It's a haven for the wayward. We are all here because we want to be, because the train chose us. Her name was Lily, and she was there because, in her words, a 1920... The 1920s were boring. I was in between men, down on my luck, and wondering where I was going to go when... Sorry, guys. Kind of struggling today. Wondering where I was going to get my next meal. I'd sold my jewelry, my nice clothes, and I was considering selling the only other thing I had of value, she said with a wink and a soft slap on her bottom, when a train rolled up right in front of me on the street. I hadn't seen one on the tracks for a while, and now I'd nearly been hit by one. When the door to the boxcar came open, I suddenly decided that it might be time to ride the rails. Maybe I could go to California and find something better. Maybe I'd just ride it forever and never go back to Philly. Either way, I got on and just never wanted off. I eat every night, drink when I want, and never have to care about much of anything. It's like Neverland and Coney Island all rolled into one. You'll love it here, I can assure you. She was sweet, but her vocabulary was certainly dated. We moved around the car, talking to people and meeting the other residents of the dining car, and Lily introduced me to all of them. That's Adrian Manderley. He was a gambler who hit a string of bad luck. He was trying to step out in front of a train when this one pulled up. That's Vanessa Childs. She was a child actor who became addicted to heroin. She got picked up by a train while walking along the tracks. Boy, was she fun to deal with for a while, I'm here to tell you. Gloria and Garrett Mercer, twins who once committed murders across the eastern seaboard. The train found them fleeing the authorities in a train yard and invited them in. They may be murderers, but they've been safe as houses since they got here. They claim they only killed child predators, starting with their own father, but who really knows? There were dozens of them, and as I walked and drank and listened, I suddenly became aware of something else. Well, someone else. He was dressed in a smoking jacket, with pants that I thought might be called Khalif pants. He looked like he was wearing slippers, and a fez, too, and he was walking towards the other end of the bar car. He was walking slowly, almost sleepwalking. and the door he was heading for was framed in a much dimmer light than the ones that had led me there. It appeared to go deeper into the train, but the mood around it was anything but welcoming. It almost seemed as if no one was supposed to go that direction. "Hey, where are you going?" I blinked and realized that I'd taken a few steps towards him, and when Lily grabbed my arm, it was almost a blessing. Her eyes followed what I was looking at, and she bit her lip as she caught sight of the man. "That's John Lorraine. He's some kind of old-timey prospector. He's supposed to have searched for gold until he was half crazy. Then he managed to find the train. He says it wasn't a regular train when he found it, but I suppose the train appears to people in different ways whenever they need it. He's been here longer than I have. He's one of the men who welcomed me warmly when I arrived." "What's he doing?" I asked, as I watched him reach for the door outlined in the dim light. "He's heading into the unknown," Lily said, and she said it as if it was something that upset her more than a little. "What's the unknown?" Lily shrugged. "Nobody knows. That's why it's called the unknown. People stay in the dining car until they feel the need to move on. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes decades, but eventually everyone moves on. The car would get mighty crowded if they didn't." "Is he going to come back?" "Some of them do," Lily said, and she watched John pass through the door and into the inky darkness that awaited him. "But most of them don't. They pass into the unknown and they're never seen again. Some of them get lost in there. I suppose a few of them find their way out, but no one is really sure. A few of them come out the other side and find their way back to the dining car. We welcome them back, but they can't seem to remember what they saw in there. It's a shame, really. I'd like to know what's on the other side of that door, but I'm just not brave enough to have a look for myself." I can't tell you how long I spent in the dining car. It felt like we danced and drank and ate for 100 years, but I know it couldn't have actually been that long. When I was tired, I would sit on one of the couches and take a nap. When I was hungry, I would eat from one of the big platters they set up on the bar. Steak, lobster, soup, bread, and anything else that I wanted seemed to appear on the trays. If I was thirsty for something other than alcohol, then all I had to do was ask the bartender, and he would get it for me. It wasn't always exactly what I wanted, but it was always pretty close. Lily and I spent a lot of time together. Sometimes she would come and sit with me while I was napping. Sometimes we would dance together as the band played song after song. Sometimes new people would join the Nowhere train, but mostly it was just the folks that were already in there. They told endless stories of things that they had done before they came to the train, and most of them seemed like they were trying to remember them, because if they forgot, then they might cease to exist. After a while, I did the same. I talked about the places I had seen and the things that I had done. I talked about my old family, about siblings that I would never see again, as we all rode the endless rails of the Nowhere train and went nowhere. During all that time, I found myself looking at that door into the unknown. I felt drawn into it, like I needed to know what was beyond it. But no one that I asked seemed to know. Many of them agreed that Marcus Reed had gone into the unknown many times, but Marcus didn't seem to have a clue what was back there. If you asked him, his eyes would mist over just a little bit, and he would always hold up his glass and say that the drinks tonight were particularly good. Isabella was another one who had gone, but when you asked her, all she would do was shake before she went off to talk to someone else. The ones who had gone into the unknown didn't seem to talk about their old lives as much as the others. They still told stories, but most of them just listened. It was like something in the unknown had taken something from them, and they were lucky to be back alive. I don't know how long I was there on the train before I went to the door, but I remember Lily grabbed my hand, telling me not to go. Why would you want to go into there? Aren't you happy here with me? Don't you want to stay and dance and talk? Just live our lives right here where it's safe. There we go. I told her I needed to go, that I needed to know, and she just shook her head and told me to do whatever I felt was best. She walked off with tears in her eyes. Ugh. She walked off with tears in her eyes, but I could tell that she was hoping that I would be one of the ones that came back. I saw others looking at me as I put my hand on the doorknob, and as I turned it and walked inside, I heard it close behind me with a note of finality. I'd stepped onto no part. Blech. I'd stepped. I had stepped not onto a part of the train, but through the door to a back alley in a dark and polluted-looking city. I could hear sirens, I could hear gunshots, and all around me I could hear unfamiliar night sounds. A single bulb burned over the door, and I could see another near an empty streetlight. I decided to follow it, decided to see where it took me, and as I moved out of the alley and beside an abandoned street, I felt eyes watching me. There were buildings all around me, apartment buildings and people's houses, and the figures in the windows seemed to look at me. They stared openly, looking for something in me that I didn't know was there, and as I moved down the street, I could feel them as they hated me. I don't know how long I'd been walking before I saw someone else on the street, but the sight of it filled me with terror. It wasn't a person, not really, but the approximation of a person. It was like a shadow with definition, and its eyes were two coals that burnt deep in its head. It didn't attack me. It didn't speak to me. It just took a step toward me, and suddenly I knew I didn't want it to catch me. I didn't want it anywhere near me, but when I turned, I found that it was not alone. There were others behind me, maybe the watchers from the windows, or maybe not, but they were there. And when I turned back to run away, the first one was there. He stuck his hand out, and when it touched my chest, I was swallowed up by an all-consuming darkness. The next thing I knew, I was opening another door, and the eyes of the people in the dining car were upon me. They all looked at me with the same blank expression they had worn the first time, and then their faces split into grins, and they welcomed me as they sang, and they welcomed me as they sang the same song over again. Another soul on the nowhere train, another lost soul who's much the same. Nowhere to be, nothing to see. Come stay with us and forget your pain. Lily came up to hug me, and she took my hand and led me over to get food. What was it like? Do you remember anything? At the time, I didn't. I only knew that I had stepped through the door and found my way back to where I'd been. Lily said that I'd been gone for 3 days, which seemed weird, though I couldn't have said why at the time. I talked to people, I ate, I drank, and I slept when I needed to. I found that Lily was always by my side. She always had an arm in mine. She was always looking at me as if she were trying to memorize my face, and she always seemed to want to be where I was. I don't know how long I spent on the train, but after a while of drinking, dancing, and eating, I would always become restless and see what was in the unknown. People would try to stop me, and Lily would often do so very vocally, but I would always go back to the unknown. As you may have guessed, my experience in the unknown is something that would come back later, but they were never anything I remembered at the time. Once I walked through a warehouse where the shadows clung to everything. There were rooms within it that were full of this or that, but I suspected they were all empty boxes. The shadows began to gather before I could find a way out, and then I was walking back into the dining car yet again. Another time it was a sewer, and I was chased by similar shadows through endless tunnels of wet and damp. The smell was often overwhelming, but so was my sense of need. I couldn't have told you what I was looking for. I don't think I really knew. But every time it ended, with the shadows getting me, and me stepping back into the bar car. I'd wandered through corn mazes, through empty factories, through desert streets of deserted streets. Deserted streets of cities with buildings that were full of eyes, through abandoned highways and lonely country roads. But the ending is always the same. I noticed that I, too, was becoming quieter. I listened more, I spoke less, and Lily became worried. I asked her to come with me into the unknown many times, but she always refused. She said the unknown was scary, and she just wasn't brave enough to go where I dared to tread. She would cry sometimes, saying that I was trying to leave her, but it really wasn't so. I couldn't have said why I needed to continue to go into the unknown, but it was like an itch that I just couldn't scratch. I was sitting with another of the old-timers, a man that had been there for a long, long time and who had gone into the unknown twice as often as I had. He rarely spoke anymore. He mostly just stared off into the distance, and I found being around him comfortable. Lily had gone off to speak with some friends, but she kept looking at me in that worried way that women often do when they're afraid their man is going to leave them or move on to someone else. I didn't intend to do either. I think I loved Lily. At least I did in my own way. And when I glanced back at the old man, I saw that he was looking at me very steadily. You have to remember one thing when you go into the unknown. Pardon? I asked, spitting out a little of my drink as he startled me. You have to remember one thing when you go into the unknown. The places you go and the things that you see are mere illusions. The train does not create fields and barns and whatever it is that you see. I can't quite remember them, but sometimes when I close my eyes to nap, I dream about them. It's not important what you have to remember. It's that there are things the train creates from your memories. All excuse me. All the places that you've been and all the things that you've seen are fodder for the train to use. What you must remember, what you must keep inside your mind, what you must never forget is that the train is just a train. It can take many forms, and it can be many things, but it's still just a train. I nodded like I had any idea what he was talking about, and when Lily came back to sit next to me, she must have seen something on my face. "What's wrong, Charlie? You look as if a goose walked over your grave." I told her I was fine, but I don't think she believed me. For a little while longer, we danced and we drank and we ate, but my mind was on the door now. The words the old man had told me echoed in my head like flies buzzing inside a melon. I couldn't get rid of it, I couldn't shake it, and I knew that one day it would lead me back to the door. I'd have to go. It was non-negotiable. I would go to the unknown, and this time something would be different. This time I would remember what he said, and this time it would all be different. Lily never left my side in those days. She would look at me with eyes that knew that I was about to leave her, but they were eyes that didn't understand how I would do such a thing. Then, one evening when she was sleeping, I felt my feet move towards the door. People watched me go. People shook their heads, but they didn't stop me. They knew what I intended to do, and they knew that one day they would do the same. I suppose they didn't want people to stop them when their time came either. I took one long look at Lily, and it almost broke me. She was sitting on the little couch by the bar, looking like a kid who'd tried to stay up for New Year's and just couldn't manage it. For a moment, all I wanted to do was forget about it and go back and sit with her. I wanted to kiss her, to pull her into the coat room and do a few other things with her. I wanted to tell her that I would never leave and that she didn't have to worry ever again about me heading off into the unknown. I wanted to do those things, but in my mind, I knew that I couldn't. I knew that if I didn't go through today, then I'd go through tomorrow or the next day. I knew that eventually I would go into the unknown. The longer I put it off, the worse it would be. I turned the knob. I remembered what the old man had said, and when I stepped through the door this time, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. To you, that might mean it was an alien world or a plane of unknown horrors, but it was honestly the most expectant of landscapes that I'd seen so far. The unknown appeared The unknown opened onto a sleeper car, the kind with sliding doors and little windows so you can see into each. They were empty, each of them appearing freshly cleaned and ready to receive anyone who might decide they need to take a snooze. I started walking, slow at first, and then faster and faster as I went. As I went, things began to rise up in those sleeper cars. It was the same shadowy people who were following me everywhere else, and I began to wonder who they were for the first time. What did they want? Why were they here? Who had they been? Might have been a better question. I started running without really meaning to. I ran past the closed doors as I tried to get to the end of the train. The things inside the rooms looked at me, and their candlelight eyes looked very unhappy to see me. They rattled the doors, pushed at the glass. Cracks appeared as they fought to get at me. I just kept running. I ran and I ran as the train stretched out for what seemed like forever. I could see something getting closer up ahead. It was a door. The door at the end of the train, and as I wrapped my hand around it, I suddenly knew that there would be no going back if I decided to open it. Either the creatures would get me and I'd go back to the dining car, or I'd open this door, and I'd get out of the nowhere train. I thought about Lily just once, and then I opened the door and stepped out into a sudden rush of wind and rain. I fell flat on my face on the wet gravel, and when I turned around, the train was gone. It hadn't moved. It hadn't rolled away. It was just gone, and I was left in another abandoned train yard with rain soaking into my suit jacket and gravel rubbing holes into my skin. I'd gotten on the train outside of Atlanta in 1984, and when I found someone to ask where I was, they told me I was in California, and the year was 2008. I had been on the train for over 20 years, but I hadn't aged a day, and the only proof I had that I had ever existed besides my memories was my nice dinner jacket and the suit beneath it. The pocket watch and the cufflinks came in handy when I went to a pawn shop and sold them for some money. Nobody noticed my dapper... Somebody noticed my dapper suit and asked if I was on my way to a party. I told them that I wasn't, but if they knew of one, I'd be happy to go. I made a joke about being all dressed up with nowhere to go, and the man laughed and offered me a seat in his car. He took me to a New Year's Eve party that was being held at someone's estate, and I must have learned a thing or two from talking to the stuffed shirts on the train, because they assumed I was somebody's nephew or brother who had been disinherited or simply walked off in his best clothes. The owner of the house helped me to get back on my feet, helped me find a job with his nonprofit, and even introduced me to some of his friends. I run that nonprofit now. I'm actually doing quite well for a guy who used to sleep in a coal closet. The only thing I can't seem to find again is someone like Lily to spend my life with. Sometimes I wonder if she's still on that train, or if she ever found the courage to go into the unknown. I still look for that train, but I've never seen anything like it since that day. Sometimes I just drive through the desert and look for weird trains sitting in train yards or laid up on track siding somewhere. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth getting off, even though it all seems to have worked out so well. I wonder, too, if the man who gave me that advice saw the door at the end of the train and was simply too cowardly to open it. Maybe he was the smart one. Maybe it was simply better to ride the train forever, and I have to deal with this waking world. As I said, when I got off the train, I regained all my memories of what happened while I was in the unknown and what happened while I was on the train. Seems like an odd sort of consolation prize when you think about it. I can remember every night I spent with the most beautiful woman that I'd ever met, but I can't go back there. I'm getting older now, looking 50 square in the face, and I've begun to wonder if I'll ever see that train again. Perhaps that's what the train is, a little glimpse of heaven before your time. If you're lucky enough to get on it, don't take your time on the nowhere train for granted. It made me the man I am today, but it's also one of the most painful memories I'll ever hold. There you go. That is the Nowhere Train. Bit of a longer one. Guys, I think I'm going to call it for tonight. The last story will be a surprise. I'm starting to lose my voice. But I hope you guys have enjoyed the stream, and I hope we'll see you again next time. Hopefully I'll be feeling a little better. I was feeling kind of poorly tonight. But hopefully I'll see you guys next time, and we'll have to do it all again very soon. Keep an eye peeled for next week's stories, and keep an eye peeled for more Grandpa stories, because I've got a bunch of them written, since we're going to be closing out the season soon. Anyway, till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Hope you guys have a great evening, and thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.